moves with no regard for human life.
Deshaun Jackson gets a block. Are you kidding?
And a steal. Miller retreats to the three-point line and hits again.
Pajero! Oh, you beauty! What a headshot! What a head!
Welcome to the No Regard podcast.
Welcome back.
I've got Marcelo with me. And
Hey man, we survived a week.
We survived a week. We dealt with the backlash, the
Yeah.
horrible backlash. No, we want to say thank you guys for getting on board for the first episode, and we hope to bring more brilliant and insightful content from two guys who have no idea what they're talking about.
Absolutely no idea, but let's get right into it, Nathan. Let's not waste any time. A bit of a controversial topic to begin with. MMA, you want to start us off?
Okay, so in Brazil,
Yeah,
I
that's
think
right,
you
that's
said,
right. Yep.
the first woman versus man fight in a mixed martial arts arena where the woman actually won in a sort of official competition sort of atmosphere.
Right, so I mean, let's get the facts right. So they were sparring partners. So they worked out in the same gym, right? So they're used to hitting each other, you know, like a sparring partner, someone that you could just take all your effort out on, and they have to fight back because that's just how you train in boxing and in martial arts. So what happened is the woman that was supposed to fight this woman, right? She had to pull out of the tournament. So the man that she sparred with actually came in and fought her for, I think it was just one round before the ref called it off.
Because I think, as far as I'm aware, she pretty much came in and smashed his nose to pieces and they had to call a knockout.
Right. So
she cleaned him up.
So like in a real competition, she would have won. Okay, so what this brings up is the question: should women fight men in a professional setting, in mixed martial arts or in boxing?
And I think it's very different when you're talking about any sort of martial art. Like, there's a very different context between the different sort of martial arts. Something like judo, where it's very much about technique, grappling, would be more socially acceptable, I'd imagine, than something along the lines of the official UFC or something like that, where maybe it's not as no holds bars as back in the day when they were using headbutts and that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
But it's still a very brutal sport in the context of martial arts. So I think the precedent set by this was obviously, and a reason a lot of this is a topic, is the female bantamweight champion of the world, Ronda Rousey.
Right.
Who I'm a huge fan of.
Yeah,
what
I
she
mean,
does.
she's probably the most dominant female athlete outside of Serena Williams right now.
Oh, of course. And then, well, even Serena Williams isn't beating no competition within 15 seconds when she gets out on the court.
It's a different sport.
It's a
Come on,
different
man.
sport, but like when you watch her and she gets her opponent on the ground within 7 seconds and she's beating the hell out of him.
It's absolutely dominant. And that's why we're talking about this, because of Ronda Rousey, right? I mean, she's the reason that this has come up in the media lately. She's so dominant. And to be honest, in my opinion, I think she could beat a lot of men right now in the UFC competition.
See, the thing with fighting is, I think, and she has actually brought this up when of course she's been asked the question before, because she is so dominant within the women's side of the sport. And I agree with her on this point that I think it does have too many undertones of perhaps domestic violence or some other darker parts of the violence that obviously the UFC doesn't want to portray as part of its image. And of course I'm up for equality in sport, I'm up for equal pay, I'm up for equal marketing, everything like that. I think there's a lot of talented women's athletes in the world that definitely don't get the shine that they should. But I think in the same breath, when you're talking about UFC and fighting, in that sort of no-holds-bar sort of setting, I think it would set a dangerous precedent that may not promote the image that the UFC may want to promote.
Right. I mean, to your point, I mean, domestic violence in the United States is one of the biggest problems in terms of the major sports. Right. So in NFL, NBA, there's always domestic violence stories. And that's got to stop. And, you know, I don't think having a man fight a woman as part of an entertainment factor on pay-per-view, you know, on national TV, I don't know if that could help at all. I mean, you talk about equality and the pay. I agree with you. I think they should be paid just as much as their male counterparts in the same sport. But in terms of a male fighting a woman, there's too many too many social aspects that go into it that are just too negative, you know?
And exactly, like, you would not want to promote that image as part of your main marketing brand. And, like, how would you market that to the masses in a way that wouldn't be perceived, in a way that would be negative for the organisation? And I personally think it would be an incorrect move.
Right, I mean, but
for it to
would you
move
like
into
to
the
watch it? Because I would like to watch Ronda Rousey beat on a man, just for the...
Yeah, but you've got internet videos
for that new
like,
thing,
there's,
you know?
One of the funniest videos I've seen her in is where she, like, the interviewer was talking to her about how she couldn't beat a man, and she just puts him in, obviously it's staged, but she just puts him in an armbar and completely wrecks him.
Right.
But I think that would be in the comedy sort of context where the thing is, like, there would really, the only positives that come out of this sort of result is when the woman wins, because you get a lot of positive undertones from it. But then if the man wins, it brings other...
It's a bit of a lose-lose situation.
Yeah, exactly.
You know?
Like, if you lose, you got beat by a girl. If you win, you beat up a girl. Like,
Yeah,
you know.
and that's the macho part of it, but not even getting into that, like, just the domestic violence thing, it's too tough to be putting that on TV.
Of course.
As part of entertainment, you know? So, I mean, could it happen in the future? It could, you know, society changes every day. Our opinions change, and, you know, women are only going to get better at fighting.
Of course.
So, we'll see how it goes down the line, but as of right now, I don't think it should be even considered.
Of course not. Not as part of mainstream entertainment.
No.
Okay, let's move something a bit close to home and something a little less violent.
Yeah, something a bit less controversial.
Thank God. Well, maybe not less controversial. The A-League, as of this week, the Perth Glory have been removed from their finals place. They will automatically finish in 7th place due to salary cap breaches. Do you want to start us off on this?
Well, I
one,
mean,
Simon?
you know what this means, right, Nathan? This means our home team, the Brisbane Roar, gets in the finals, right? By default.
Repeat from the 6th spot. Let's go.
Let's go, boys. I mean, so Perth Glory was sitting in 4th with 44 points. They were actually tied on points, except Melbourne Victory has a game in hand at 1. So what this means is Adelaide is going to go into 3rd, Wellington will go into 5th, Melbourne City will go into 5th, and Brisbane Roar will be at 6th. And I don't think there's any way Central Coast can reach us. I don't even know if that's mathematically possible. They're 8 points behind. I mean...
And 8 points with less than a few games left. Even if it is mathematically possible, it's very rare that it happens.
Exactly, and the Roar have a game in hand. But what I wanted to ask you was, do you think the punishment was deserving?
Now, there is precedent set for sides being kicked out of the finals late in the season. Obviously, the Melbourne Storm precedent set a few years ago with the salary cap breaches where they did actually lose their premierships.
Right.
They're not recognised as official premierships as yet. And then also last year in the AFL where Essendon weren't allowed to make the finals because of obviously the ongoing performance enhancement scandal. So there is precedent for sides being kicked out of the finals as a punishment. And it, as far as I'm aware, it was deliberate, it was purposeful, and it was aware of the clubs for these third-party payments to be made for up to 3 seasons. Mm-hmm. So this is a very deliberate action by the club, and I think the punishment does fit the crime in the immediate sort of sense. What's going to be done long-term is up in the air, but right. I think the short-term punishment, that's very appropriate. Like, there would be huge questions being asked of them in a finals push, especially if they won the premiership. No one would... It
wouldn't be valid, right?
It wouldn't be a valid premiership. So I think it's up to the A-League to make a slow and calculated decision as to the punishment in the long term, but I think the short-term action was the correct one.
I mean, I completely agree. I think you strip them of their points, right, on top of what they've already had. So if they finished bottom of the league this year, I think it doesn't really do much because it's only top 6 that make playoffs. And since they're out of the finals, that's already done. In terms of the long-term punishments, I think there's a lot of repercussions that could be made, including dropping their max on the salary cap. I mean, can you imagine if Perth Glory weren't caught? So they could have been paying stars that other teams just couldn't be able to pay. You know, you're talking about Melbourne Victory, stacked team. Sydney is stacked. So is Adelaide. So is Melbourne City. But they're not paying anyone over the salary cap, right? So Perth Glory have got really good players. Hersey out on the wing is one of my favourite players in the league. So I really do think the punishment fits the crime. I think long term, there's a few things that they could do, but I'm not too upset about it.
And you'd hope there'd be more oversight from the club.
Exactly, right.
From the league on situations like this, so it's not allowed to go on for so long. Obviously, the third-party punishments are appropriate, but then again, I think the salary cap in itself isn't valid in a global football sort of market anyway. But I think if it's a regulated policy, then it needs to be followed, obviously, by every club in the league, and they've broken a almost crucial part of the sport. So
yeah, I mean, as opposed to Europe, Australia does have a salary cap in their football league, you know, and it is a crucial part of the league because it lets the smaller teams rise up to the ranks of the bigger teams that might have a bigger markets. You know, Melbourne, Sydney, Adelaide, Brisbane, all big markets. Newcastle Jets, not so much, you know, but thanks to the salary cap, they had a pretty good team. They're not doing too well this season, sitting in ninth, but they've had pretty good teams in the past.
And Wellington's actually in the final spot this season.
Exactly, right? And so these small teams have a chance to make it big because of this salary cap.
And I think you'd see a very sort of defined top 4, top 5, if you had taken away these bars, because obviously Melbourne City owned by Manchester City. If you took the cap off them, you can imagine the kind of spending they might engage in to try and push their way up the league.
Exactly.
If the salary cap wasn't in place.
And you don't want a situation like in Spain, right, where you have Barcelona, Real Madrid, and props to Atletico Madrid for rising up to third place. But apart from that, the other 17 teams in the league just aren't relevant.
Yeah, the beautiful thing about salary cap sport is that it's secular. So you're going to see 5 years from now, you won't see the same teams at the top unless they're very well-run clubs.
Exactly.
You're not going to see the same teams at the top in 5-10 years, and that's just going to keep turning around so every team gets their chance. And I think that's the beautiful thing about a salary cap in sport. And you see that work almost perfectly in the NBA and the NFL and the AFL. So I think it's something that should be shut down and they should be made an example of, so it isn't something that's broken again.
Yep. All right, well, speaking of A-League, our finals predictions, Nathan. Who do you think makes the final of the A-League this season?
Look, I like Melbourne Victory. I think any side that leagues the league and takes the Premier's plate for the season has to be hugely considered for finals football. And in saying that too, you obviously have the best goal scorer in the league this season at Sydney FC. So I think they are a dark horse to make it as well. But look, man, A-League, whenever that's mentioned, I just have to pray that some team can do it. Brisbane Roar from the 6th spot. Come on, Brisbane Roar.
I mean, if anyone can do it from the 6th spot, it's Brisbane Roar.
Oh, yeah. And we were obviously at the final last season. Hugely amazing experience. 50,000 people.
Both of us fans of Brisbane Roar, of course.
And in the Den, the place to be
Yep.
at a Brisbane Roar match.
I mean, I agree with you. I think I would love to see Brisbane Roar make finals, but for me, it's got to be Sydney against Adelaide in the final.
Oh, okay.
I really like what Adelaide's been doing this season. Their coach is amazing. He's one of my favorite people of all time. The Spanish, straight from Barcelona Youth Academy, actually, former coach at China as well. Yeah, he won a few championships there. And Melbourne Victory is just too stacked not to make it.
Oh, yeah.
You know, the Berisha signing was amazing for them. Archie Thompson scoring goals here and there, you know, still adding a bit of goal-scoring prowess. But Sydney with Mark Yanko is too good, I reckon. It's too good. And with Aaron Moy in the middle, and I actually got in a bit of a Twitter beef with some people this past week talking about Aaron Moy and his potential. I think Aaron Moy is one of the future Socceroo stars on that Tim Cahill, Harry Kewell, Tim Brasciano level.
Big call.
You look at how this guy plays, man.
And we did, we were earlier watching a match in the season.
Right.
And obviously your love affair for this young Socceroo is very real.
I mean, I have a love affair for Aaron Moy and Tommy Juric, but just Aaron Moy, the work rate, he is an engine in the midfield. He does great passes. He's got a nice shot. He's strong. Not the tallest guy, but he's very strong, does great tackles. I think he's going to be the leader of the Australian team in a few years to come.
Do you reckon he'll move away from the A-League soon?
I hope not. To be honest, I don't think he will either.
And obviously, like, we've seen other Socceroos quite recently too that have made moves to bigger teams that have been just buried in the rotation.
Right.
No chance of developing their game to the standard they'd like. I think A-League football for players that are there, I think now that the league is establishing its quality a bit more than it was a few years ago, I think it is a league where young players should stay until they're sure that they could establish themselves at a bigger team. And this is obviously a topic we might address later on a bigger scale.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think the A-League is starting to establish its quality a bit more, especially with the younger players.
Yeah, I mean, there's a ton of younger players in the league that could make it. And just talking on the Australian national team and people leaving the league, can you imagine if Mila Jedinak was still in the A-League? Or like if he played on an A-League team in one of these top 6 teams?
Or if Tim Cahill had come back to the A-League in place of the New York Red Bulls.
Right. I mean, that would be huge. These are some of the best players. I mean, for me, Jedinak is probably our most important player.
Of course.
It's just sitting in that center midfield.
Kingpin, a crucial part of a Premier League team. So, I mean, Mila Jedinak has really come up through the ranks.
Right. I mean, okay, so in terms of ladder positions, I think Melbourne Victory does win the championship, the premiership, for the regular season. I think Sydney finishes second. Adelaide comes in at third. Wellington will come into fourth. So I've got Melbourne City fifth. I think Brisbane Royal finished sixth. Now, I want to hear what you think as well.
I think it just makes me emotional every time I talk about Berisha after you see him.
Oh my goodness.
What he did in the final last year and how connected he was with the Brisbane fans. And now you watch him be a dominant force for another team, leading its team to the title. I think Berisha's a champion. I think, obviously, as you said, that Melbourne Victory team is very stacked. And I tip them strongly to do the double of the, obviously, regular season title and the grand final trophy. Obviously, I consider the grand final trophy a more prestigious award.
Right.
And you're getting... I think the brilliant thing about the A-League is that you get the sample of both the English game, where it is a race to the top over the regular season, and the great things about the Australian games like the AFL and the NRL, where you do get a grand final sort of atmosphere, the 50,000 people in the stadium, and a big game to finish the season. So I definitely think Melbourne Victory can do the double, and I tip Berisha to be lifting the Premier's Plate and the Grand Final trophy 2 seasons in a row.
All right. Well, just before we move on from the A-League, I just wanted to touch on Tommy Urich because he is that other Socceroo that I am in love with. Now, he's been getting a lot of criticism lately because he can't finish, I was watching a few games, and sometimes he gets in positions where
How old is he, by the way? He'd be 21, 22?
He'd be something around that.
Yeah.
I'm not entirely sure, but it's a very young player, and, I think Fox Sports had come around with a hashtag asking people on Twitter if Tommy Urich should stay on the Socceroo roster, and I was mind blown, to be honest. I don't even know how that's a question. I mean, tell me, what other Australian striker is that big and can hold the ball that well in the squad?
I think shooting slumps are something inevitable for almost every striker in the world, unless you are on a consistent, brilliant level, like a few of the obvious strikers that are plying their trade in Europe. But I think shooting slumps for almost every big striker is an inevitability at some point, and the ability that you can't finish.
Right.
And the important thing is that you do still get consistent football, that you're going through your rounds, and then eventually, obviously as a striker, the opportunities will fall to you to score goals, and once you can start putting them in again, obviously you can experience a renaissance. And it's not like he's in a situation like Fernando Torres where he's not being able to finish for a few seasons.
Right.
It's only been a handful of games throughout the season.
I mean, sometimes he'll pop up and he'll score a beauty,
And that's what you want from a striker. Like, you want the ability that he can do that. And it's just being able to do that on a consistent basis. But obviously that comes with age and experience. And at 21, 22, it's more just expanding your physical gifts as well as bring your technical gifts as brilliant as possible and putting as much work in as possible.
Right, because, technically, he's probably the most gifted in the Australian squad. He came on to that Asian Cup final and he won the game for us.
Oh.
People forget, people have such short memories. Tommy Urich was the driving force for us winning that cup. That's the biggest piece of silverware Australia has ever won. If not the only
I'm trying to think of the other ones that come to mind.
We've ever won. So, Tommy Urich should already be a national hero.
Oh, exactly.
And for me, he is. So
and the brilliant thing is, it's not like Tim Cahill where he's like 36. He's
right?
in a position where he can establish his legend further.
So this is the future of Australia right here, and I hate that the media, the fans, especially the Wanderers fans that say that, he should go to China, just take the money because we don't want you in Australia. No, these are the types of players that we need in Australia to grow and to just carry the league further, because I think this guy could be a dominant force anywhere he plays within the next 3 or 4 years.
Big call, big call. And I agree, and I think in the terms of players moving, we might move on to some more controversial topics in the bigger leagues,
Right.
Overseas. So recently, Liverpool young player Raheem Sterling has copped a lot of flack for some comments that he's made and some moves he's perceived to make or not make. So Raheem Sterling has been offered, allegedly, a £100,000 a week contract. So just mind-blowing money for someone of that age, a 20-year-old. And he's perceived to have turned it down as yet. Now, he still has more years on his contract at the current £35,000 a week, but he's turned down an extension and obviously a pay rise. Now, it's perceived as money grabbing by a lot of teams, and it's taking away from a team right now that is trying or has recently tried to push its way back into Champions League football contention. And it really does distract from what Liverpool's trying to do. And it made me think, with these young players in football, what do you think they are? Do you think they get too much too soon in the way that they're getting paid too much too soon and they want too much too soon and their ambition is too strong before they actually fully establish themselves in football?
Well, I mean, to begin with, the whole transfer market is inflated through the roof, right? I mean,
ridiculous compared to 10, 15 years ago.
It's a huge problem because there's just too much money going to these players, and it's every summer, every transfer season. There's just hundreds of millions of dollars worth of contracts going this way and that way. Players don't perform. And, I mean, the whole market is way too inflated. So when you talk about youngsters getting too much, I think I do agree. They do get too much too soon, and that's based on how well they did at maybe a youth level or at a youth level with their country or in a small league, I mean, you look at what Hazard did in the French league, and he played really well, and he deserved the money that he got at Chelsea.
Of course.
But that's an anomaly, that's an
exception
outlier.
to the rule.
You got so many players that's happened to, and they just don't perform at the big clubs. They get their money, they kind of fall off, go back to a small team. And that money isn't necessarily wasted because the athlete does need to get paid. But the whole transfer market as a whole is just way too inflated. There's too much money going to the young kids. And I agree. I mean, I think he's getting too much too soon.
Do you think I think the best place for him to be right now is Liverpool.
Yes.
And he should be there for the next 2, 3, 4 seasons.
Yes.
And now we look at another kid, and I'm going to call him a kid because he's actually younger than us.
Right.
16-year-old player purchased by Real Madrid. I think Martin Odegaard is the way you'd pronounce it.
Yep.
Hugely touted youngster, usual comments, next Messi, next Neymar, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, the usual nonsense.
Pretty much the pick of the clubs in Europe. Right. Absolute pick of the clubs. So he goes to Real Madrid, as I would imagine a lot of European and South American and pretty much any player would want to end up. So he's going there early. He's obviously, as 16, he's asked to play as part of Castilla, so the B team in Real Madrid, run by an absolute legend in Zidane.
Yep.
And now there's reports coming out of Real Madrid that he's causing a ruckus in the dressing room. He doesn't work as hard as he should be. He doesn't fit into the system. He's driving his coach mad. I really think at that point, especially if you're in such a system where everyone's older than you, you should just be the one keeping your mouth shut, putting the most work in, trying to establish yourself, especially with the talent that he's got. He's getting paid €80,000 a week.
Yeah, but you know what you're talking about, though? You're talking about the perfect professional, right? Someone that'll work hard, go in, shut their mouth, do everything well. Those are the kind of players that become legends. Ronaldo put the work in. He wasn't just born like that.
You wouldn't have heard anything like this from Messi or Ronaldo at 16.
Exactly. They put in the work.
Messi didn't really open his mouth till he was winning Ballon d'Ors, and even then it was humble.
He's still one of the most quietest players ever,
Yeah.
So,
and he's created, what you say and what you do off the field isn't going to make you one of the greatest of all time. And if you're being touted this high this early, And I think Neymar is another outlier because he was so much hype from like 16, and now he's a top player at a top club.
Mm-hmm.
And I think players like Hazard and Neymar are like very rare.
It's so rare. It's very rare that someone that gets paid so much money actually performs, because the expectations with the money are so high,
Of
you know,
course.
and some players crumble. And I mean, we're talking from a managerial standpoint, are they worth the money? But imagine you're the player and you're getting offered to go play for Real Madrid for how much was it? 80,000 a week? That's euros, right? That's a lot of money. Would you say no, Nathan?
Of course you wouldn't say no. I'm just saying you take advantage of that opportunity as much as you can. But then again, we look back when we were 16. If you were getting that kind of money at 16,
Oh my goodness.
what were you thinking about when you were 16, Marcelo? What kind of choices would you make if you were making 80,000 euros a week?
I would have put a deposit on that Ferrari real quick, you know what I mean? I'd be on a flight to LA real quick, you know, I probably
Hanging out
wouldn't,
with the boys.
probably wouldn't come back, you know, I'd probably buy my boys a few houses, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, when you're 16, this is what you're thinking about. You're not mature enough to make financial decisions.
An ultimate professional is maybe not a discussion we put up. But then again, you're paying these players this sort of money. I think you do expect professionalism and maturity at a younger age than you would expect from a normal adult.
Right.
And I think there is too much money in football for these young players. And I think the real estate the big clubs are buying up, where they're buying up all the youngsters before they even develop and making them sit on the bench or...
Well, I mean, there we go. I mean, so is it the club's fault to pay them so much money?
And like, obviously, there's two sides of the sword. You can pay $5 million for these hugely touted youngsters now, or you could wait maybe 5 years for them to develop at their clubs, and you might be paying 30, 40 million.
And you risk another club buying them up before that as well, you know.
Like, and you look at clubs like Manchester United, who didn't play Paul Pogba, so he went to a club where he was going to get the opportunity, and now he's like ridiculous money being thrown around for his signature. Like, I personally think Paul Pogba's going to be the best midfielder in the game in 5 years.
Okay. I can see that, yeah.
So I think he's a dominant force from both an offensive and defensive sort of standpoint. And then Manchester United pretty much just throw him away. So
right.
It's very
different. But that happens every year, yeah, you know? I mean, do you think United would have kept PK if they thought he would play as well as he is now? Of course they would. You know, I mean, yeah, sure, in those days they had
Would
Vidic
you rather
and
have
Ferdinand.
Phil Jones or Gerard Piqué? It's kind of a...
I mean, Piqué is a top 5 centre-back right now.
Oh, yeah.
He wasn't for a while because his form slumped, but now he's back. He's playing very well. He was probably the reason Barcelona won that game against Real Madrid, the last El Clasico. So these things happen every year. I mean, you can put the onus on the club. Maybe they shouldn't pay players that much, but then another club will.
Oh, yeah.
You know, how many mega clubs are there? You got at least 20 clubs that are going to be paying the youngsters so much money because they have it. You know, they make so much money in revenue from merchandise sales, ticket sales, sponsorships, that it's really no problem for them to splash money on a big player. And I mean, on the players' side, as you said, when we were 16, we would have taken the money.
Oh yeah, for sure. Like, and these players aren't thinking about, they just want to follow their dreams. And
exactly.
You got to put mad respect to that. I think we might keep it moving.
Yeah.
We could talk about this forever, obviously.
Yeah, we could. I mean,
dreaming about us getting 80 grand a week.
I mean, it's just an edgy topic because the player needs to get paid and the clubs need to make sure
if the money's there, and of course, as a football fan, you'd rather see the player get the money than the owners stacking it up.
Exactly, because a lot of players don't get paid for the services that they get. So I'm happy to see someone get paid, but it's... if you're going to get paid that much money, the expectations are there and you should fulfill them.
Yeah. All right, let's move it back closer to home again.
Again, back to Australia.
jumping on those international flights. The AFL. We're 2 weeks in now. Currently, as we're speaking, I think the Lions are about to line up for their second game, but still, it's very early days in the season.
Right. I mean, so I got a few questions I want to ask you, Nathan. I mean, who do you think finishes in the top 8?
Now, the top 8 pretty much breaks down... See, there's some really well-run clubs at the top of the league that have been basically there for the last 8-10 years. Now, Sydney and the Hawks are probably easily the best-run clubs in the AFL. They have the best coaches and the best front office staff that are really making the right moves to bring the right players to the clubs. I think the Hawks finished in the first position, and I did say last week I think they win the premiership, and that's because they're the best round team with stars at every position. I mean, you have a midfield run by the best captain of the last 10 years in Luke Hodge, just leadership personified. You obviously have Jordan Lewis, who's turned into an absolute gun. Sam Mitchell, probably one of my favourite players in the AFL, just an absolute clearance monster. And then, obviously, in the forward line, you have Jordan Roughhead, huge goal scorer, Luke Bruce, Jack Gunston, just absolute automatic in their set shots. And then the back line now, an all-star lineup of James Frawley and a few other players like Josh Gibson and Sean Makers and all of them.
So this is a stacked team, right?
An absolutely stacked team from top to bottom, run by Alistair Clarkson, who has obviously 3 premierships under his belt now. So I think they finish in first position. Sydney in second position, in the way that Sydney are also a very stacked team. One of the best forward lines in the league, like Lance Franklin, obviously the David Beckham of AFL.
Right.
Plenty of money in Sydney, and obviously a champion.
Lance Buddy Franklin.
Buddy Franklin. So Sydney finishes in second. I think Port Adelaide, a great young team. And with guys like Chad Wingard, Ollie Wines coming up through the ranks, going to get another year of development. Travis Spoke, I think they finish in third. Fremantle's been up there for the last few years as well. I think they can finish in fourth. Geelong, the immortal team, the Spurs of the AFL, if you need the analogy. And same guys, they keep turning over their team for new young players, and I think they will run by arguably one of the other best captains in the AFL, Joel Selwood.
Wait, so why do you have Fremantle going ahead of Geelong then?
So Fremantle are in the way that I think they can really lock it down at their home ground even better than Geelong. I think making the trip out to WA is hard for a lot of teams. And they have the second best player in the AFL, in Nathan Fyfe, my favourite player. And I think they can really force it in the top 4, but I don't see them necessarily making the grand final or anything like that.
Right.
Adelaide, great young team coming out of there. Patrick Dangerfield, Rory Sloane, Scott Thompson. Brilliant midfield, and I think I see them in 6th. Richmond, with some great young players. I think they'll make the finals for the 3rd straight year for the first time in 40 years or something like that.
Right. Uh-huh.
Dustin Martin's a top 10 player, and I think they can make it. And lastly, Gold Coast, I see a Queensland team finally making it. Gary Ablett will carry them into the finals, but they won't necessarily get a premiership this year. They're still too young, they're still too inexperienced, and we've seen that in recent weeks. They won't make it past the first elimination final, but I see them making it into the finals.
Right, I mean, so touching on the Queensland teams, how do you think the Suns and the Lions are going to do this season, respectively?
The Suns will make it into the finals. I think Gary Ablett will get back to normal health soon, and I think they have a brilliant midfield, great team, brilliantly talented. I think I can see them winning a flag in 2 to 3 years, but it's not their time yet. It's not their time. They still need time to gel and develop. I see them making the finals. The Lions, a lot of new players, and it's the best we've looked in 5 years, but we've looked horrible for the previous 4.
Right.
So now we'll just miss out on finals, but I still have hope for the Lions. I still think they are a dark horse to make the low final spot, but I think no one can really compete with Sydney and Hawthorn.
Well, I hope for your sake that the Lions do well this
I
season.
hope for my sake too, but you lose hope after 10 years, trust me, from being a great team. All right.
Well, give me some players. Who do I need to watch, Nathan, in the league?
I'll give you 3 players that you do need to watch this year, young players. Marcus Bontempelli, funny last name, but a brilliantly skilled player, looks better than everyone else. He just has that poise when he plays on the field for the Western Bulldogs. Not going to be a finals team this year, but that player is a gun. Second year, he can do it. Robbie Gray out of Port Adelaide is just also another player with a lot of poise, a brilliant forward, always dangerous, can kick 3-4 goals out of nowhere, but can also move to the midfield and drive your players. So I think he's another one to watch. And lastly, coming from Brisbane, I think Daniel Rich, obviously still a young player, but he's now back from his injuries, and I think he has the poise to be the best in Brisbane and hopefully drive us to the first final spot in 6 years.
Hopefully, Nathan.
Hopefully.
Always want to see Brisbane do well.
Yeah, you always want them to, but they don't always. Proceed to what you wish. All right. We're going to jump back on another international flight over to the US.
Yeah. Back to some NCAA action. So we talked about this last week, and you actually got the pick right. You picked Duke
The
over
first
Wisconsin.
pick of the podcast, and it goes to me. I get the satisfaction this week.
I mean, so Duke beat Wisconsin. It was a great game. It was one of the best college games I've ever watched, okay? And, I mean, the centers, the Kaminsky and Okafor, they went at it. But what happened in the game was Okafor actually got in a lot of foul trouble. So it was up to the guards of Duke to get the ball into the net. Now, I want to talk about Grayson Allen, because this guy is who won the game for Duke, okay? Straight from the bench.
Heat check, just an absolute
It was
heat
amazing. He went 5 for 8 from the field, 5 of 5 free throws, 2 rebounds, 16 points, okay? 16 points is the second highest scorer for Duke, okay? Behind Tyrus Jones, who obviously led the game in scoring.
Yeah, obviously the Duke guards are probably the driving force.
Right. And I mean, it was such a close game until the final part of it. I think Mike Krzyzewski was just a class above everyone else, and he displayed it again. I mean, what can you do against a coach like that? There's not much, right?
Coach K is, you would have to say, one of the greatest coaches in basketball history.
Yeah, not even like college or pro. I'm talking like basketball as a sport.
Game of basketball, you would put him up there with Greg Popovich and
Phil Jackson.
Red
Auerbach, yep.
Of course, so he's one of the greatest to ever sit on the bench.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously Duke's, is fifth ring now? Coach K?
Something like that.
Something like that. His fifth ring with Duke, and we remember watching the 30 for 30 on the Fab Five, like one of our favourite documentaries.
Right.
And in that documentary, he was winning it in 1992, so this is a huge space between...
Around for a long time.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the reason why the program is one of the top 2 in the country.
Yeah, and he's won some Olympics as well with the national team.
And there's a reason why they go to him instead of the NBA coaches for an Olympics tout, because he's just a brilliant coach.
Right, and I mean, just touching on Okafor as well with the foul trouble, I think his draft stock actually dropped from this game, and I thought it would rise because now that Karl Anthony Towns was eliminated, I thought Okafor would dominate Kaminsky, but it was actually the other way around. Okafor finished 5 of 9 with 10 points, only grabbed 3 rebounds, to your point from last week, how he doesn't get the rebounds very well. And to be honest, I'd be surprised if he went number 1. I think Towns goes number 1 purely based on how he played in this high-pressure situation.
And I think the thing with Towns was it was never going to hurt his draft stock if he didn't make the championship game, because so many eyes are on there.
Exactly.
If you don't perform in that game, it hurts your stock. And I think Kaminsky was the big winner.
He completely outplayed him. I mean,
the Duke guards and Kaminsky were the main winners in terms of their draft stock.
Yeah.
Out of that final, but
I mean, Kaminsky grabbed 12 rebounds, 2 assists, 21 points, 7 of 16 from the field. I mean, those are good numbers. They're very good numbers. And Okafor just
Frank
didn't...
the Tank.
Yeah, he just didn't play well, you know? I mean, these things happen. You can't judge a player on one game, but I think they were so close in terms of their quality. I think Towns does go number 1 to whoever that may be this season.
Of course, and there might be secret hope to where the number 1 pick might end up.
Oh my god!
That the Knicks might actually win something.
If
that
the
being
Knicks
the draft
get
lottery.
Towns, we're gonna have a NBA draft special in one of the pods to come. But if the Knicks can get Towns, I have a lot of There's just so much that can happen with that pick.
Oh, for sure. And it will be a big power broker whoever wins the lottery this year. And maybe the Sixers will win it and just draft an injured guy again. But we won't get into that.
And by the way, I mean, you mentioned 30 for 30 Fab 5. If you haven't gone and watched that documentary yet...
That's our recommendation of the week. Go watch the 30 for 30
Fab 5.
Chris Webber, Jalen Rose, just Michigan program, historic team.
It touches on a lot of social aspects as well, what they went through in those days and the revolution that was the Fab 5 out of Michigan.
Course.
So it's a great watch, would recommend.
And I think last thing out of the championship game, I think defense mainly won it for the Duke team. I think them just playing absolute lockdown, suffocating defense, because they knew they couldn't stop Frank Kaminsky, because Okafor can't play great defense, and that also hurts his draft stock.
Right, I mean, so Okafor was sitting as well.
But the thing is, everyone else on that team just played absolutely
The first
brilliant.
half, it was a block party, man. Yeah. I mean, even Wisconsin was getting on the blocks as well. So it was a great game, one of the best college games. And to be honest, I thought it would be a below par game because Kentucky wasn't in it. You know,
Yeah.
I wanted to see Kentucky
And you always
against
want to
Duke.
see, but they were 2 number 1 seeds, and obviously Wisconsin with one of the best offenses in college ball. So obviously with Kaminsky, it was always going to be maybe a pretty great final.
Right, so we were pleasantly surprised with how well that game played
Well,
out.
I don't think Kentucky will be doing it next year because basically their whole entire rotation declared for the NBA draft.
Yep.
As did obviously Jahlil Okafor, Frank Kaminsky, and a lot of other players in college ball. So it will be a very interesting draft this year.
Yep.
With guys like Kaminsky and Okafor and Karl Anthony Towns. But obviously we'll get into that a bit more as we finish talking about the current players after the season finishes.
Right.
So we might move into the NBA. So some big, more off the court news this week. So some players are heading up a spot after a back-to-back.
So
in New
ex-Nick
York.
Chris Copeland, right? I mean, back in
So
New York.
he knew the town a bit.
He knows where he's going,
And
right?
a few other Hawks players actually. Atlanta Hawks were also there after a back-to-back.
One of the best-
Sefolosha.
One of the best defenders in the league in Sefolosha.
Yeah, and that might actually hurt the Hawks because a situation happened at the outside a nightclub in New York at the early hours of the morning, about 3:50 in the morning or something like that.
And I mean, you can read the details, you can read the police reports, but who really knows what happened in these situations?
Yeah, and one of my favorite sayings is that no good decisions happen after 2 in the morning.
Right.
And he was just standing outside the nightclub, apparently having a argument with his significant other.
Mm-hmm.
And another gentleman comes up to them and stabs them, actually.
Essentially just stabbed him, his partner, and also stabbed his partner.
The partner of the person who was doing the stabbing.
Right,
Like,
and God
so-
knows how that happens, but in a
so it
nightclub
was a
you're
huge
drunk.
fracas.
I mean, God knows.
Thankfully, there's no life threatening. They're both in a stable condition. We don't know, obviously, how that's going to pan out for their basketball prospects, but obviously this is bigger than basketball.
Well, the big thing coming out of this is that Sefolosha broke his leg, right?
Now, they were both arrested, Thabo and obviously his Hawks teammate Parantic. They were both arrested for, I think it was something like disturbing a crime scene.
It was contaminating a crime scene, something like that.
Something like that. They were trying to get involved where they
Something
shouldn't be.
weird, you know?
So the police acted quite forcefully with Thabo Sefolosha and broke his leg. So this obviously rules him out for the rest of the season and out of the Hawks rotation.
I think that's a big piece missing from the Hawks, to be
I
honest.
don't think it is. I think the Hawks have the tools to replace him, and so they are able to replace him in the way that it won't affect them.
I mean,
going into
Thabo is the
postseason.
kind of guy that you can put in off the bench to stop someone like a J.R. Smith from going off.
Oh, of course.
So, I mean, yeah, he's important. The Hawks are good enough to play without him. I don't even have the Hawks going too deep into the playoffs, so I can't see it making too much of a difference. But still a big piece.
Still a big piece. He's a big part of. He's a rotation guy, basically. So he's in the team, and it will affect the team going forward. We are heading into the home stretch of the NBA season, so only about 2-3 games left for each respected team. Some big movements recently. As of yesterday, the Spurs beat the Rockets for the second time in a week.
My pick from last week's looking good, Nathan.
So that had some big movements to the table. So the Rockets drop out of the top 4 completely because everyone is so close in that Western Conference lineup. So they're now the 6th seed.
Mm-hmm.
And the Spurs are now the 3 seed. So they're looking like they might hold on to home court advantage throughout the playoffs. And you feel like Pop has just orchestrated this.
Yeah.
Like, you feel like it's been no accident what's happened the last 2-3 months where the Spurs have just gone on this ungodly run. I think it does affect the Rockets. Like, I think without home court advantage, and especially if they stay in the 6th seed, they're going to either be playing Memphis or the Spurs.
Right.
So it's going to be a hard grind
I mean,
to
it's gonna
even
be
get
a
through a
hard-
first round.
Exactly.
right?
Hard game for anyone in that Western
And
Conference,
obviously
really.
they've shown that they struggle against the Spurs. So I think a first round series against them would be an absolute nightmare for that club.
And for those of you saying Tim Duncan fouling James Harden on that play, the final play of that game, where the
I am
Spurs,
one of those, but
you know what? Maybe it was, but I'm not giving it to him. Why was the game that close anyway? You know, I mean, sure, like these are two great teams, and Tim Duncan is a great player going up against who we think is the current MVP this season, who is going to be the MVP this season, in James Harden. Maybe it was a foul. I think he touched the ball on the way down. I mean, I know we disagree, but...
So check out this footage, obviously, if you haven't seen anything like that. I think you can't rely on referees calling fouls in the last minute of the game because obviously whistle and mouth syndrome and some of the greatest plays of all time, Reggie Miller hitting a shot over Michael Jordan where he basically pushes him down. Michael Jordan hitting the winning shot over the Utah Jazz in the 1998 finals was basically pushing someone to the ground. You can't rely on fouls in the last minute of big games because the referees won't call a foul.
Exactly.
You got to let yourself play, and if you can't get the shot, you can't rely on a foul.
It happened to LeBron James last season too, you know, with Thiago Splitter and that block.
Of course. You can't rely on the referees in the final minute of the game. They will let you play, and even if it does get a bit more brutal than usual, you can't rely on foul shots in the last minute.
I love it, man.
You got to let them play, man. You got to let them play. All right. We'll move on to our question of the week.
Okay, so who is the EPL Player of the Year?
It's been a big season. It's been, I don't want to say it, but it's been a slightly boring end of the season, to be honest. We've known Chelsea as probably the champions-elect for the last few months, really. Now Arsenal's actually making a push. They've won 8 in a row. 8 in a row. Mm-hmm. I still don't see Chelsea losing it. God, I hope they don't
No
lose
way.
it. No way. I think
way.
they're professional enough and they're a good enough coach that they won't lose out at this point in the season. But now we get to start talking about the Player of the Year.
Right.
I personally think Eden Hazard has been the most consistent presence for the best team in the league the entire season. Obviously, guys like Costa and Fabregas, as we said last week, they rushed out a lot earlier in the season, getting crazy statistics, just being general dominant forces. But I think Eden Hazard is the best player on that team. You watch him play, and he's almost a class above the other players on the field. He plays with such professionalism and such determination. I think from both being the best player and being a player you would want to set an example of, I think Eden Hazard, as well as he's scored 12 goals this season from the midfield, whereas on a side where you also have a dominant striker in Costa, I think he's played very well. And I think he is my Player of the Year. Obviously, other candidates come into it like Alexis Sanchez or Arsenal's whole team, basically, for the first half of the season.
Right.
And Costa and Fabregas as well, but I think they've faded. And Coutinho from Liverpool, I think, is another candidate, as well as Harry Kane. But I think what more can be said about Harry Kane?
I mean, I agree with you. I think it's Hazard, and to your point, he's the best player on the best team, right? And you can talk about Fabregas and what he's done for the team when he came in from Barcelona, and you can also talk about Diego Costa's 19 goals. But Hazard has been so consistent, and yeah, he's got 12 goals from a midfield position. And, you know, like, there's other players that have scored a ton of goals, like Aguero with 17. But it's not consistent. Hazard's been playing very well every game. He's been scoring consistently. Not putting up, like, 4 goals a game like other strikers will. But he's been putting in the crucial goals. I agree.
And
I think he's player of the
season. I think beyond players like your Zlatan Ibrahimovic, your Messi, your Ronaldo, you don't measure it just by goals. You've got to know the impact that they made on the team, and I think he is a future captain of Chelsea. I think he plays with a professionalism that is admirable for every player. And as we mentioned before, he is that outlier where he's gone from a club where he was a dominant force as a youngster in Lille over in France, where he was scoring like 20 goals, 20 assists a season, and now he's come in as a huge contributor for Chelsea, the biggest club in England at the moment. I'm going to say at the moment, obviously. You know,
I mean, he stepped up from last season too, because you remember he was getting burnt on the defensive side of the ball.
Of course.
In big games too. So, you know, I think the effort level has really risen. The whole team has played very well under Jose Mourinho.
I think the defence is a lot more solid than it was in previous seasons. I think establishing that back four of Azpilicueta, Ivanovic, Terry and Cahill, I think that's a brilliant move. I think Azpilicueta's now an established left back, and I think he's a brilliant fullback in that. I think Terry's still showing some vintage performances, as well as Cahill being one of the best centre-backs in the world.
Yep.
It's defence and attack, and I think best player on the best team, Hazard, Player of the Year.
I mean, we need to mention Courtois, though, right? When you talk about the defence, you got to talk about Courtois and what he's done for the team. He might be in the top 5 goalkeepers in the world. And how young is he?
Yeah, of course.
I mean, you think about it, we got Neuer. I probably wouldn't put Casillas in there anymore. Courtois.
I think you got to come in Courtois almost immediately after Neuer.
Right.
Like you can talk about guys like Loris and everything like that.
I like Joe Hart. I think he plays very well.
I think he's had a return to form this season, especially that game against Barca. But
I can't really think of too many other keepers. I mean, you got Bravo, but he's been splitting time at Barcelona, so you can't really give him a top 5 placing.
Especially when you're splitting Bravo with Ter Stegen and everything like that.
Exactly.
Ter Stegen's a young keeper that I think has the potential to be maybe talked about as near that class.
Right.
Eventually, but I think Courtois is a big driving force, and I obviously question the move when we already had Petr Cech.
Right.
But I think Courtois is a brilliant keeper, and I think Cech will maybe move on after this season.
Yeah, I mean, what he did at Atletico Madrid while he was loaned out was amazing.
Of course.
He was the best player in the league. Best goalkeeper in the league, sorry.
Whoa.
Got ahead of myself.
Breaks on
there.
that.
Yeah.
But yeah, like, I honestly, like, it's showing why loan moves work. This is the brilliant example, maybe an exception to the rule, obviously, again, why loan moves work. Like, loaned him out for 3 seasons at Atletico Madrid, and now he's come back and he's doing brilliant things.
Yeah. So, I mean, let us know if you agree with us. Is Eden Hazard the best player in the league this season? If you don't agree with us, tell us why. Tell us who you think is the best player in the league. I mean, I think it's going to be hard for you guys to disagree with us, to be honest. But
yeah, like, obviously there's guys that have put up more numbers, and I think Harry Kane does come into the conversation for probably the most improved.
One of the bright spots of the season.
Yeah, one of the, like, best young player, maybe. But it's hard. Like, it's obviously an award, an individual award, and I think for players, hopefully they care more about lifting a trophy at the end of the season than they do about the individual awards.
Yeah. Well, I think thankfully for Hazard, he's gonna
He's
lift
be doing both. Yeah,
Yep.
he's gonna be doing both. All right. We're going to finish it off with our and ones for the week. We're going to have a bit of fun with this. We'll talk about a few things that we like the most.
Do you want to go first, Nathan?
All right. So, I think most of you would have seen it by now. It is the biggest movie in the country, setting all kind of box office records. Fast and Furious 7. We're not a movie review podcast, so we're not going to spend too long on this.
Yeah, I don't want to reveal any...
We don't want to steal anyone's thunder.
Too many big spoilers either, you know.
But I think it was a brilliant send-off for Paul Walker.
Yeah.
I had a lot of fun with the movie, and I think with Fast and Furious movies, you know what you're getting. You're going in for a good time. You're going in for an action movie that's going to be a lot of fun, a lot of fast cars, a lot of explosions. You know what you're getting, and I think it delivered perfectly, and I think it's a brilliant send-off for Paul Walker.
Yeah, I mean, not the best storyline as always, you know.
Yeah, but then again, you have to suspend your sense of belief when you watch Fast and Furious.
Exactly, and there's a
if
lot
you think
of...
about the physics or anything like that, you're not going to have a good time.
A lot of challenges to the physics. I mean, a lot of illogical decisions and actions and sequences taking
out
place.
Aircrafts with so many cars, and I don't even know.
Right.
Like,
I mean, going to Paul Walker, I think the send-off that they gave him was
the last 5 minutes of the movie, the feels were felt.
The feels are definitely felt, and I think they did it so well. Because, you know, a lot of people were actually thinking that, spoiler alert, that they'd kill him off in this movie. And I'm so glad that they didn't. I'm so glad that they sent him off at the end when Vin Diesel's car and Paul Walker's Supra just split over 2 lanes. That was so emotional. It was such a great send-off, and I think they did well.
Brilliant
to
song
respect
by
it.
Wiz Khalifa as well at the end. You know, like, I think the way they were out was very classy, and I think I wasn't expecting it, and I'm glad that they did it that way.
Yeah.
But great movie. Let's go on to a great TV show. What's your own one for the week, Marcelo?
Game of Thrones Season 5 premiere.
It's finally back.
Tomorrow,
it's
baby.
Finally back.
Oh my god, we've been waiting for so long, Nathan.
Oh,
I cannot wait to watch this first episode.
I'm a huge fan of it. I've read the books, but obviously that knowledge is not going to be too relevant anymore because they're going to start to divert from what the books were doing. Because if they've killed off a few people that are still alive in the books.
Don't tell me because I haven't read the books.
Yeah, but they've killed them off in the TV show.
Right.
But they're still alive in the books. I think this is a season because the books, in my opinion, get a lot less reader friendly and it's a very slow series in the most recent books, like A Dance for Dragons. If people don't know, that's going to line up pretty well with this season and very well the last book that was written. So they're going to go away from what George R.R. Martin is writing. But I'm excited. I'm really excited for what they're going to do.
I'm so excited. This might derail my university studies just a little bit.
if we don't have enough distractions already to drive us away from that.
Right. So I think that's it.
All right.
Right. I mean, we wanted to touch on cricket legend Richie Bernard.
I think we want to just do a quick tribute to Richie Beno. It's obviously a very sad passing. He's an Australian icon, a cricket legend. It is a real tough time for a lot of people in cricket, and I think everyone who's watched cricket in the summer has obviously heard his voice quite extensively throughout their lives. So we just want to do a quick rest in peace for Richie Bernard. He's a brilliant, he's a legend of the game, both as a player and as a commentator, obviously, commentating for almost 50 years.
Mm-hmm. I mean, he'll be remembered as a commentator, but thoughts and prayers to the family as well.
Of course. An Australian icon, and we wish the family all the best. But that's going to do it for this first...
we finished the second one, Nate.
Yeah, second week done. Shoot us on Twitter or Facebook if you've got any questions, queries, any comments on what we've said. And obviously, if you want to put your opinions out there, we want to hear from you guys. What are your opinions on the topics we've talked about? What do you want to hear us talk about? And do you think we had any Blues on our opinions of our own? Do you think Hazard is the player of the year? Do you think Hawthorn will win the AFL? And do you think Melbourne Victory will get up in the A-League?
Right, and recommendations for this week, remember to watch 30 for 30, Fab 5, Fast and Furious 7 if you haven't done so.
And get on that Game of Thrones.
Get on Game of Thrones. Catch up on Game of Thrones right now.
You have 24 hours to watch the first 4 in the first 4 seasons if you haven't started
already. It is the best binge watch you will ever do. Ever. Alright, I'm Marcelo Lucha.
This is Nathan Bleakley, and we're signing off from the No Regard podcast.
See you guys.